Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Racha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Esther, the 7th chapter. And so continuing from where we left off last time, we dealt with Haman, basically the Lord flipping it, right? Because he had intended to go and request that Mordecai be hung on the gallows that he had built. And instead, the king had requested for him to, to dress Mordecai in array, in this glorious array, and parade him throughout the town, the city, so everybody could see, right? Basically to glorify Mordecai for having saved the king's life. And now, having been invited to Esther's banquet, we see the setting of Esther Chapter 7 taking place here. So this is the book of Esther Chapter 7 verse 1. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. So he had asked her this when she came to the things like the courtyard, and she was fasting. I believe it was on that third day. She ended up fainting, and the king asked her, what it was, and then she invited them to this banquet, right? Followed by the second banquet, which they are at now. So he's asking her again. So what is it that you want? Anything. Well, I'll give it to you, even up to half of this kingdom, which is a lot. Verse 3, Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition. So, my petition is for you to spare my life, right? And my people at my request, and also the lives of my people. So now you can imagine, the king is like, if you imagine the setting of what's going on here, he's probably looking at a bit confused. What do you mean by that? So she elaborates, right? She says, For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. Because remember what Haman said, right? He said he would deposit X amount into the king's treasury so that the Jews in all the different provinces of this kingdom may be destroyed. It says here, But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue. So if we had been sold to be slaves, right, servants, I wouldn't even have said anything, right? Although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. In other words, that she wouldn't have said anything because that wouldn't have been, worthy for her to disturb the king's peace of mind for that. But this is a matter of life and death. Verse 5, Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther, Who is he, and where is he, that durst presume in his heart to do so? So who who has the audacity to set themselves in their mind to dare do this? And Esther said, so imagine this conversation, right? Haman is there, the king is there, Esther is there, right? Of course, it's not just them three, probably, because you always have servants. Who's going to bring the wine? Who's going to bring the food? So you have servants, right? And you can imagine in the beginning, Haman is all happy, but then he starts to see the direction in which this conversation is going, and he starts to get a bit nervous. So now, having heard this, he's like, oh, what's going on here? So Esther replies, right, verse 6, And Esther said, The adversary and the enemy is this wicked Haman. Oh my gosh. At this point, you already know. His face probably turned red real quick. Okay. It says, Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. So now he shook. He probably had a very surprised look on his face. Like, oh man. Verse 7. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, he's pissed. He probably slammed. That was just for dramatic effect. But anyway, he probably slammed the table. He's all pissed off. You got to imagine it. It says here, went into the palace garage. So he just needed some space for a second. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen. So immediately, you know how Edomites get down, right? So he's, no, please, hold on a second. Let's think about this now, because he knew what was coming. For he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. So by seeing how pissed the king was, he knew that whatever was coming his way wasn't going to be good. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the palace of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. So you can imagine he's trying to plead for his life. So he's probably maybe on his knees or wherever it is. But long story short, now the king walks in, and this is not even a good sight. Then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house? So this mother, you know what I'm saying? This guy gonna try to violate and coerce, the queen right here. As the word went out of the king's mouth, it covered Haman's face. So you can imagine, some of these movies, they do that, right? You have somebody, they're talking to somebody, and then you just have some people just come from behind them with like a bag or a sack, and then just cover their face and drag them back somewhere. And right on cue, right, as they covered Haman's face, it says here, and Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also, the gallows of 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. So now he added more information that the king probably was not aware of. That, oh, by the way, this guy also set up gallows very high that he could hang Mordecai. The same Mordecai that saved your life, by the way. Then the king said, hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. And just like that, this guy was gone. Just like that, the threat of genocide was lifted up by the hand of the Lord. All this is like how the Lord plays chess. The right moves at the right time, setting up the right things. It's all the workings of the Lord. And this is why the first and foremost most important thing we always do is to pray and trust in the Heavenly Father. Because that is what they did. That's what Esther did. That's what Mordecai did, right? They kept their faith in the Lord, and then boom. Look at how quickly the Lord turned a dire situation, in the opposite. So anyway, that brings us to the end of the book of Esther, the 7th chapter, where we now see the demise of Haman. After all that he did, his pride and all that, well, he finally met his demise. So with that, Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Raka Kudash. Until next time, Shalom.